Welcome to all of our listeners and viewers around the country and around the world. A series of protests are scheduled outside the New York Post today to condemn the publication of a cartoon that critics say depicts President Obama as a chimpanzee. The cartoon, drawn by Sean Delonis, shows a white police officer shooting dead a chimpanzee in the street. His partner, another white officer, says, quote, they'll have to find someone else to write the next stimulus bill. The cartoon appeared in the paper 2 days after police in Connecticut shot dead a chimp in the streets of Stamford and 1 day after President Obama signed the economic stimulus bill. The Reverend Al Sharpton said, quote, the cartoon in today's New York Post is troubling at best, given the historic racist attacks of African Americans as being synonymous with monkeys. The National Association of Black Journalists called the cartoon the lowest common denominator of taste and class.
New York Post editor-in-chief Carl Allen denied the cartoon was racially charged. In a statement, Allen said, quote, the cartoon is a clear parody of a current news event, to wit the shooting of a violent chimpanzee in Connecticut. It broadly mocks Washington's efforts to revive the economy. Again, Al Sharpton reveals himself as nothing more than a publicity opportunist, he said. We're joined now by two guests. Eric Adams is a state senator here in New York. He protested outside the New York Post on Wednesday. He's planning to be there again today for a major protest at noon. He's the former head of the organization 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Who Care. We're joined in Baltimore by Dedrick Muhammad. He's a senior organizer and research associate at the Institute for Policy Studies, former national field director for Reverend Al Sharptons National Action Network. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! State Senator Eric Adams, your response.
Well, I believe that when you look at the drawing, the caricature, and on the next page you saw that you had Obama actually signing the bill. To state that it was a broad description of what took place in D.C., I think that's ridiculous. That in itself is a joke. The fact is there weren't several chimpanzees being shot. There weren't hundreds of legislators being shot. There was one. There's one author of the stimulus package. That's Barack Obama. That correlation, I believe, clearly showed that this was a way of just continuing the method of just degrading not only Barack Obama, but African Americans in power. There are those who are troubled by the fact that we have an African American president. We have an African-American governor, an African-American leader of the Senate for the first time in almost 60-somewhat years. So there's a pattern that's developing, and we need to bring it to the forefront. Yes, we need to bring it to the forefront.
Eric Adams, the New York Post has had a checkered relationship, obviously, with the black community for many years. Now, I heard that City Councilman Charles Barron is calling for an all-out boycott now, and an extended boycott of the paper. Do you get a sense that this is going to have much resonance or support within the black community?
Yeah, what's interesting here, what I was surprised of, is that historically, I think that what is often hidden is that even the communities of color is broken into sections. You have those who are affluent New Yorkers, those who are what one would consider everyday middle-class New Yorkers, and those who are just basically making it every day. Obama had the ability, his campaign had the ability to bring a common denominator for all those groups. And when I started receiving calls from individuals who I know who are developers and doing very well, individuals who are accountants or engineers, as well as those who are just basically trying to hold on to their home, everyone was motivated by the campaign, and that same level of motivation is wanting to see the Post closed down. So I think the Post hit a nerve that went throughout the entire anatomy of the communities of color and also outside the community of color. When you look at my district, it's a district that is one of the most diverse districts in the country, and all of the groups in that district were concerned about the Post article.
This isn't the first controversial cartoon of Delonis. 2001 cartoon depicted Fernando Ferrer, the Bronx borough president, seeking the Democratic nomination for mayor, kissing the buttocks of Mr. Sharpton. depiction that was widely criticized as demeaning and racist. I'm looking at the web piece in the New York Times last night. And it goes on to talk about how the cartoonist has drawn ire from a number of groups for past cartoons. In 2006, the Gay and Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation denounced a cartoon of his that showed a man carrying a sheep wearing a bridal veil to a New Jersey marriage licenses window, a reference to the state Supreme Court's ruling that year requiring the state to grant same-sex couples the same legal advice, rights and benefits as heterosexual couples through civil unions. Dedrick Muhammad, you're in Baltimore. These protests are taking place, a big one today at noon in front of the New York Post. Your response to this ad and to the New York Post simply denouncing the man you used to work for, Al Sharpton, saying he was simply a publicity seeker, and saying that this just referred to those in Washington.
Well, I mean, again, as Eric had pointed out, I mean, the New York Post has a history of being quite reactionary and of being generally offensive to African-American leaders, whether it's Reverend Al Sharpton in 2001 or whether now it's Barack Obama, President Barack Obama in 2009. And, you know, outside of just this being a New York issue, clearly, I know African-Americans and supporters of Barack across the country are outraged by this. And I think the New York Post is going to find itself that it can't just blame this incident on Reverend Sharpton, who simply put forth a comment that I think many Americans agree with, but going to have to take responsibility for their own actions. And it's one thing for a cartoonist to draw this. It's another thing for the editorial board or the editors at the New York Post to decide that this is something appropriate and that they're going to defend it.
This controversy is flaring as Attorney General Eric Holder gave an historic speech yesterday marking Black History Month. Holder told employees at the Justice Department that the United States is a, quote, nation of cowards when it comes to discussing race. Eric Holder is the nation's first African-American Attorney General. This is an excerpt of what he had to say.
One cannot truly understand America without understanding the historical experience of black people in this nation. Simply put, to get to the heart of this country, one must examine its racial soul. Though this nation has proudly thought of itself as a ethnic melting pot, in things racial, we have always been, and we, I believe, continue to be, in too many ways, essentially a nation of cowards. Though race-related issues continue to occupy a significant portion of our political discussion, and though there remain many unresolved racial issues in this nation, we, average Americans, simply do not talk enough with each other about things racial. It is an issue that we have never been at ease with, and given our nation's history, this is in some ways understandable. And yet, if we are to make progress in this area, we must feel comfortable enough with one another and tolerant enough of each other to have frank conversations about the racial matters that continue to divide us. But we must do more. And we in this room bear a special responsibility. Through its work and through its example, the Department of Justice, this Department of Justice, as long as I'm here, must and will lead the nation to the new birth of freedom so long ago promised by our greatest president. This is our duty. This is our solemn responsibility. We commemorated 5 years ago the 50th anniversary of the landmark Brown versus the Board of Education decision. And though the world that we now live in is fundamentally different than that which existed then, this nation has still not come to grips with its racial past, nor has it been willing to contemplate in a truly meaningful way the diverse future it is fated to have. To our detriment, this is typical of the way in which this nation deals with issues of race. And so I would suggest that we use February of every year to not only commemorate Black history, but also to foster a period of dialogue between the races. Our history has demonstrated that the vast majority of Americans are uncomfortable with and would like to not have to deal with racial matters, and that is why those of us, black or white, elected or self-appointed, who promise relief and easy, quick solutions, no matter how divisive, people like that are too often embraced. We're then free to retreat to our race-protected cocoons, where much is comfortable and where progress is not really made. If we allow this attitude to persist in the face of the most significant demographic changes that this nation has ever faced, and remember, there will be no majority race in the United States in about 50 years, the coming diversity that could be such a powerful, positive force will instead become a reason for stagnation and polarization.
Attorney General Eric Holder giving a major address yesterday. He is the first African-American Attorney General. Juan?
Eric Adams, I'd like to ask you, obviously, after the election of President Obama, many people were saying that the country had made major strides now in terms of dealing with